Welcome, Penn State fans, to the Blue White Breakdown, our Thursday afternoon live session. I'm Max Ralph. Beside me is Johnny McGonigal. And, folks, I don't know what more you could ask for out of this game we're getting this weekend. Penn State, number 3 in the country, Oregon, number 6 in the country, in the White Out in Happy Valley. And, Johnny, I think the anticipation keeps building. I've seen some fantastic back and forth between Oregon fans and Penn State fans on Twitter and social media. Though I gotta give it to the Oregon fans; they're pretty good trolls. They've had some good stuff this week. We saw Oregon's uniform come out last night. The mummy duck. It's interesting, Johnny. I don't know if you've got a take on the mummy duck, but it's here. It feels like it's here. I'm excited. I'm sure you're excited, and I can't wait to talk a little more about it today.
Max, we are burying the lead. Well, not burying the lead because you just talked about the uniforms and everything. But the biggest matchup this weekend is like the Nike Adidas fight because
That's true.
Penn State moving away from Nike, moving away from Phil Knight, and going to Adidas in the future. That's the biggest storyline of this game, right?
Yeah,
It's not like
absolutely.
like two top six teams playing in the best atmosphere in college football with national title and Big Ten title implications.
Yeah, no, absolutely not.
Okay, all
Johnny,
right, sounds good.
so I want to just lead this off quickly. It's Ryder Cup weekend, by the way. We always talk about golf, Johnny. I know you're hyped for that. It should be fun. We do have
It's a
some other
big
priorities.
weekend on it's a big weekend on NBC. Those
That's true.
NBC TV execs are foaming at the mouth because
Yeah,
they've got the Ryder Cup, they've got the Whiteout, and then they got Packers Cowboys on Sunday Night Football, the Micah Parsons revenge game.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, we're all going to be tuned in. Obviously, I'll be tuned in tomorrow, Saturday, Sunday for the Ryder Cup. Cannot wait for that, but very, very much cannot wait for Saturday night.
The couches are going to get some work this weekend, is what you're
They sh-
saying,
they
Johnny.
sure
It's
they
going to be
sure are.
fun. Uh,
Yes.
I want to lead this off with something I've been thinking about, and I have my own opinion. But Johnny, is this the most highly anticipated whiteout in the tradition's history? We've got about 20 years to work with of whiteouts. And I know I'm throwing you on the spot. I'm pulling a Bob here and putting you on
Yeah.
the spot. But I looked back through it. This is in fact the highest combined ranking of two opponents in the whiteout game. It is a night game, which there have been a couple of highly ranked ones pre 2020 that were not at night. This one is at night. Their combined ranking is 9. The next closest, I don't even remember, but it was double digits. It was not 9. Uh, it is, and I mean, obviously, everything we've talked about is like Penn State is a national title contender. Oregon's been so explosive to start the year. Johnny, is this the most anticipated whiteout ever?
Yeah, it might be recency bias. There's definitely a tinge of that, but I would say yes for all the reasons you mentioned. A couple of other ones just being the building off the national title aspirations end of this. I feel like in the past, whenever they've had, not whenever, because they've been favorites before in whiteouts, but I'm thinking back to like the Tom Bahali Ohio State, like there's obviously the 2016, upset of Ohio State. There have been games where Penn State were either underdogs or even just felt like underdogs. I don't necessarily, I mean, this may vary based on the Penn State fan that you ask now, based on how the first three games went in a quasi preseason. But I mean, Penn State is a favorite in this game. They came into this season as a national title favorite. Last I checked a couple weeks ago, they were tied with Ohio State for the best odds to win the national title, and that was after a disappointing game against FIU. And so, yeah, I think for those reasons alone, and then you mix in the fact that this is finally like a big opponent after how many years in a row you had Minnesota, you had Iowa, the whole deal with Fox Big Noon kickoff. Like Penn State fans should be thanking Ohio State and Texas for scheduling that non-conference game because
Yeah.
we know that Fox had, they get the first three picks in the preseason on the games, and then it goes to NBC or CBS, vice versa, flip-flopping every other year. And Fox picked Texas, Ohio State, and they were always going to pick. Well, it hasn't been announced yet, but it will be, I'm sure, in due time, that it's, Penn State, Ohio State, and Ohio State, Michigan. And so we get a night game between two top teams, a Big Ten championship rematch. I mean, what more could you really ask for? What more could you ask for if you're a Penn State fan, whether you're watching on your couch, it's going to get a lot of work in this weekend, or you're watching, from those temporary seats in Beaver Stadium, or if you're us in the press box.
Yeah.
So I'm like, there's no doubt in my mind that at least in recent memory, it is the most hyped whiteout that we've had.
I definitely think it is. I mean, the recency bias thing exists. There have been big whiteouts before. There have been quote unquote must win games in the whiteout. I'm not, that's another discussion that maybe we'll have on the podcast today, whether this is a must win game for Penn State or not. But this, just from the combined ranking, from all the factors that go into it, I absolutely think this is the biggest whiteout in history, which is crazy because this game has so much history and ethos to it to begin with. You mentioned the Fox versus NBC debate. James Franklin at practice Wednesday night, pretty funny. He went out of his, usually when he's saying something that is a little not controversial, but if he's kind of calling somebody out, he's usually very nondescript in the way he talks about them. Johnny, you know this well. If somebody asks him about Ohio State, he says, and I'm not going to talk about any other school specifically, or he says that other school, or at Big Ten Media Days, he said the other conference about the SEC and such. But Wednesday night, he name dropped Fox when somebody asked him about the whiteout and was like, Fox seems to think it's just as good at noon, but we don't feel that way. We think it's better at night with the nighttime sky against the white clad fans. And I thought that was pretty funny because that's not something we see from James very often, but that factors into this. It's a huge game. It's as big as it gets. Johnny, you mentioned the temporary stands too. I would not be shocked in the slightest if this ends up being a Penn State attendance record, or at least very close to it this weekend because of the anticipation for it. They announced 109,000 people for the Villanova game. So if they're able to fit that many in for, a non-conference FCS matchup like that in the under renovation stadium, I'm pretty sure they're going to be able to get, what do they need? 113,000 that they need? Bob wrote it up earlier this week at 111 maybe. I should know the number. I don't off the top of my head. I can find it, but I would not be surprised if that happens. And it's a huge weekend. A reminder, folks, if you're watching live right now with us, if you're watching throughout this as we make our predictions and get there eventually toward the end, you can ask us questions. You can drop your own predictions. We love to hear from you. We'll shout out everybody we can. Our guy, David Demkoski, right away said he watched the interview with Aaron Fentress from the Oregonian, OregonLive.com. Appreciate you watching that. If you haven't seen it yet, I spoke with an Oregon beat reporter earlier this week. Felt he did a fantastic job. I learned a ton about Oregon from him. Appreciate you guys watching that. Big Ten Spirit says Gabe Wosu and the defense keep Oregon backed up in the student section in the first half and give the offense time to get up. Penn State wins 35-20. Interesting. I like that. Gabe Wosu has certainly been a star so far this year. And Franklin Fanatic does agree with us, Johnny. He says this is the biggest whiteout in history and says Penn State's going to win. Johnny, I do want to talk about, before we get into our actual, specific predictions, you put a column up this morning on Drew Aller. I'm going to just kind of turn it over to you. This is kind of his moment.
Yeah, in more ways than one. It's Drew's, it's a definable moment in his career. It's an opportunity for him to win a big game. Now, all of those losses aren't just on him, but as the quarterback, as the former 5-star prospect, as the number one quarterback in the country, as the projected early first round draft pick, as all of these things, as your cannon-armed quarterback who came in and was supposed to help elevate and lift this program to new heights, a program that has been stuck trying to get over the hump, has been really good but not elite, as James Franklin said once a time ago. As all of that, this opportunity, this game, the Ohio State game, and ultimately what they do in the CFP, will fall on, if not just fall strictly and solely on his shoulders, but will be a part of his legacy at Penn State. And when people think back at the Drew Aller era and his career with the Nittany Lions as a 3-year starter, they're going to think of the big moments. They're not going to think about his passing efficiency against, Illinois or whatever, right? Like they're going to think about the whiteout against Oregon. They're going to think about the road game at Ohio State. They're going to think about at least what he hopes they won't think about is the interception against Notre Dame, is the 2 picks against Oregon in the Big Ten title game. And obviously he had some big time throws in that game. I think overall it was a good performance, but when you have 2 interceptions, one of which was basically a pick six, like those things stick with you. And so I think it's a massive moment for him. Like it's a if not now, when kind of situation, because it's going to be harder when you're going at Ohio State playing the defending national champions that just beat Texas a few weeks ago, in November. Like that's going to be a harder test than what they're going to have on Saturday night. But even still, it's going to be a very hard test. He's got to show up in these games. He is 0-5 against top 5 opponents in the last 2 seasons. His numbers aren't particularly great in those games. 5 touchdowns, 4 picks. The completion percentage is below 50%. Now that's weighed out a little bit by the 2023 game at Ohio State when Mike Yurcich didn't know what the hell he was doing. But still, it reflects on Drew and it reflects on his legacy. And that's my very long-winded way of saying, and I was even more long-winded if you'd like to read it in a column I posted this morning on PennLive, put a good amount of time into that, and care, because you want to be like, you don't want to be too over the top or too bombastic, right, Max? Like we're not out here spitting hot takes or anything or taking them down or whatever. But this is a very big moment for Drew Aller, and he needs to show that he's a different quarterback than he was last year. He needs to show that he's a different player leading a different team to a different end result against a top opponent.
Yeah, and so much discussion from us too, and everyone on the beat has been about, early in this season, it hasn't been great for Drew. I have some minor concerns because he kind of seems like he's still the same guy he was last year based on what we saw. But I still want to pump the brakes just a little bit because we don't know exactly how much they were asking him to do in those first 3 games. They did absolutely make it a point to get all the receivers involved, to get Kyron Hudson, Trevor Pena, Devontae Ross going. And they did that to some extent. But this is a different beast. I mean, Drew looked really good against Oregon last year if you take away his 2 interceptions. The one was pretty bad. The other one was kind of a 50-50 ball. Trey Wallace lost his footing, kind of is what it is. But it's just he needs to have his best this weekend, and we haven't seen it yet. And I think that's completely fair to say. But I don't think anybody is ruling out, at least between the 2 of us, that he can get there. And this is absolutely the big one. We got a number of comments here. David says, Aller doesn't have to be the best QB, the same way Carson Beck wasn't the best QB for Georgia. Yeah, I mean, Georgia had good teams with Beck around, but he's gone to Miami and done a pretty good job, which is interesting. Eric Holmes has his own prediction here. He says Aller has 5 to 7 designed runs and gets 60 rushing yards. He trimmed down and will run in this one. I don't like it. Excuse me, I don't hate it is what I meant to say. Wow, that came out a lot more.
I don't like it. Screw you, man.
Yeah, no, that absolutely was not what I was trying to say. I got crossed between saying I like it and saying I don't hate it. Yes, Drew Aller has slimmed down each of the past 2 seasons, runs pretty well, and I do think something that you have to look out for in this game, Johnny, is the fact that Oregon's pass rush looks pretty good so far this year. Mateo Uyunglele is definitely an impressive pass rusher. They saw him last year. So, Drew's ability to get out and run will definitely help. And I'm curious to see if that comes true. 60 yards would be a big day on the ground for Drew.
It would, but you know what? Yeah. He has like that. That's a part of his offseason transformation was losing some weight, getting even faster. That was a storyline going into last year. And we did see him tuck and run a good bit for first downs, especially in that Oregon game late when they were trying to come back in the Big Ten title game. And I think that's only improved. We just haven't really seen it yet. They haven't showed it as much in terms of a designed run game with him. So intrigued to see how he ultimately, fares in that aspect of the game as you're trying to keep that defense off kilter. Dan Lanning is one of the best in the country. I mean, he made his bones as the defensive coordinator at Georgia, knows what he's doing, but This is also a defense that Penn State ran all over in the Big Ten title game with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. And if you're just looking for another edge, another way to keep that defense off balance, it's Drew Aller in the design run game, whether it's an RPO or just a straight read option with Nick and Katron. I think that's something to keep in mind. I think, too, just sticking with Drew for a second and, getting faster and everything is just a part of the offseason that I think it was a really big offseason for him. And he knew that going into it. Like, the lasting image of Penn State's season last year was him walking off the field, hands on his helmet with like a face of like, what the hell did I just do with that interception in Notre Dame? And he attacked the offseason knowing, like, hell bent on getting better, knowing he needed to improve. And, I just remember talking to Danny O'Brien about that in June, the quarterback's coach. And he said just Drew's mentality is just something that he hasn't seen. Like, it's just different the way that Drew went about improving over the offseason. That's footwork. That's mentally. That's knowing that really in these close games, in a 7-point loss to Ohio State and a 3-point loss to Notre Dame and an 8-point loss to Oregon, all it takes is 1 or 2 mistakes to sink your ship. And so he's been so focused on all of that this offseason. Maybe in these first 3 games, he's been trying to play a little too perfect. Yeah. Knowing that in the back of his head. But I mean, if we just see the guy who let it rip, at times against Oregon and, the USC game last year, the list goes on. He doesn't need to throw for 350 and 5 touchdowns. That's not what I'm talking about in terms of like a definable moment in his career. It's leading this offense. It's having full control. It's not making like a costly, punitive mistake in the game's biggest moments. It's having, that right mindset and that right demeanor and the ability and the discipline to lead this team to a big win.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked to Drew this week. We got to hear from him, and I was impressed. I thought he seemed like he was in a good place mentally just by the way that he was answering questions. He seemed confident, which is really important, being the quarterback in a game like this at Penn State. We also talked in talking to James Franklin at practice Wednesday night. He was asked, how has Drew grown?
You watched Minions recently? You're dropping Drew references?
I don't know, man. I'm like all over the place right now. How has Drew grown mentally for these types of big games? And James Franklin, he said he reprised an answer that we've heard a lot where he says you can prepare all you want to be the starting quarterback at Penn State, but until you're actually doing it, it doesn't really matter. It can be a little bit different. We've heard that before. Absolutely true. Aller's been through those things. But then he did say he's grown a lot. We've seen that, and I think we've seen that too. I mean, if you go back 2 years ago to Ohio State, his reaction to that game and his reaction to Ohio State last year were both emotional, both understandably upset, but I felt like he flipped the page a little bit better each time. I felt like in games like USC last year, he was able to handle the deficit better. I absolutely think that we've seen growth from him, and I think that'll be really important this weekend against Oregon. Johnny, we've got 2 questions that I want to get to here, and actually, I have one topic of my own that I want to bring up and pick your brain on. But let's get to the question from David. So, if Penn State wins this weekend, who's getting the game ball?
Drew.
Okay.
Drew. Yeah. I think, we saw Nick and Katron run wild against this Oregon defense last year. And Oregon defense, by the way, that obviously Dan Lanning and his recruiting, and whether that's high school recruiting or the portal, we saw them bring in Thieneman from Purdue. The list goes on. It's a reloaded defense, but it's a defense nonetheless that got gashed on the ground and then lost 8 starters and lost a lot of talent to the NFL draft. So Penn State could come out and just run the ball down their throats, and that could be a way that they win. But I think in this game, you're going to see a big time, like a game-changing, whether it's a 4th down, whether it's a 3rd and long, the kind of throw that he made on 4th and 10, for the touchdown against Oregon in the Big Ten title game last year. I think you're going to have 1 or 2 of those moments in this game. And on that stage, in that environment, against that level of competition, that will warrant the game ball. So I'm the whole column that I wrote was basically around the premise of like Drew Aller has to prove to us that he is a different quarterback and that he is a better quarterback. And I do think we're going to see that. I think we're going to see that on Saturday night. So Drew is my pick, even though it's a bit of a layup.
Yeah, and I will add to that, if he doesn't look better this time around than he did last year, it's maybe fair to start raising some questions just temper expectations, because this wide receiving core is quite a bit better than what
Yeah.
he had last year. And the Oregon defense is different. They had a lot of seniors, a lot of NFL talent in the secondary that they lost. I mean, they've reloaded. It's Oregon. They've got a ton of NIL. They do a great job in the portal. But Drew has a chance to really shine this weekend, and I agree with you. I think he could. I've been on this train ever since James Franklin spoke about it on his press conference on Monday. I wrote about it in my stock watch that we may get to. We may run out of time and might just hit it quickly. I also wrote about it in my prediction, but I am all aboard the Zachy Wheatley train this week. I'm hyping the guy up. James Franklin says things for a reason in his press conferences, especially when he goes out of his way to say them. And he said, out of his way, Zachy Wheatley is starting to really click in Jim Knowles' defense. We talked to Zachy this week. He said it's just kind of a matter of being in the defense longer, having more time with Coach Knowles, and he's doing a lot of different things. He's playing in the middle of the field some more. He's kind of having that Caleb Downs role for Ohio State that Knowles had last year, and obviously Caleb Downs was an elite defender. Zachy is so athletic, has such a nose for the ball. I mean, 9 turnovers in his career is what he's responsible for. I just think that he's probably going to get one this weekend. If he's playing fast and if he's feeling good in the defense, I'm giving him my game ball. I bet he makes, 7 tackles, maybe more, maybe double digits. I think he might get a pick. I think it's a big day for Zachy Wheatley and the Penn State defense. And I think if Penn State wins, it's going to be him, at least for the defensive game ball. Johnny,
Max,
yeah,
really quick. I just have one more to add because in order, I like that pick, by the way. For
yeah,
Drew Aller to have those opportunities, he's got to stay
yes.
upright. And
Mm-hmm.
so my side pick, my honorable mention, or just like, hey, keep an eye on this, and something that we've discussed off pod, is the offensive line, and more specifically the offensive tackles, because
Yeah.
they've let up a few pressures here in the first few games, and now you got Mateo Uiagalelei coming to town, who is one of the best edge rushers in college football. And so I'm looking at Nolan Rucci, I'm looking at Drew Shelton, whoever Mateo is lined up over, and they've got some other defensive, NFL quality defensive talent on that line. But whoever is matched up, every play I'm going to be watching, at least off the snap, Mateo Uiagalelei against Penn State's offensive tackles.
Yeah, Nolan Rucci is another one who James Franklin said this week is kind of starting to play more like what he did down the stretch last year, which would be a really big deal. The communication, the chemistry, the gelling up front has been a bit of a storyline so far. It's got to happen this weekend. Johnny, this other question is from Brentski, who's a frequent viewer. I appreciate you being here again. It's a little bit out of left field, so I don't want to spend not to say it's a bad question, but it's a little out of left field, and it's not necessarily Oregon related. So I want to answer it. I don't want to spend too much time on it. If Kotelnicki sticks around another year, which I think at this point is way too early to say if he will or not. But what are the odds that Penn State brings in a portal quarterback more suited for his offense, or brings Bo Prabula back for another year?
Does Bo have eligibility?
Yeah, he should. He's a redshirt
I
junior.
guess. Yeah. I guess he would have 1 year, right?
Yeah, because he
Uh,
redshirted when Drew did not. So
yeah, I don't know about the Bo end of this. I don't know about the Andy sticking around end of this. That's one of those where, like, if Penn State has the kind of season it wants to have, he's going to be a head coach somewhere. And if they don't have the season that they want to have, it's probably because the offense didn't do what it needed to do. And not saying you would not bring Andy back by any means,
right.
but no, the portal quarterback question, just to because we want to stick with Oregon here, like James Franklin. I'd rather really just talk about this week's opponent. This is more of a question for like a bye week question or whatever, but the portal quarterback thing is interesting because Drew is gone. You got Ethan Grunkemeyer. You got Troy coming in the 2026 class. And then Beckham Kritza, we haven't really heard a whole lot about, and kind of unsure about kind of where he stands future-wise with Penn State in terms of his development and what he could maybe be or not be for the Nittany Lions. So, yeah, I think this is something we might have discussed a few weeks ago, even off the pod. Like, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they brought in a transfer quarterback, which would be the first time in the portal era that James Franklin has brought in a portal quarterback.
Yeah, no,
Now that's not necessarily to start,
yeah.
because I think Brunkemeyer is ultimately the future of this program, and that's with the assumption that Smolik would transfer,
Mhm,
which you don't want to ever assume anything.
mhm.
But with Grunkemeyer being the clear number two there, you could certainly see that happening.
Yeah, I mean, I like the question a lot.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. I will say, I'm gonna guess there's about zero chance that Bo would portal, considering how well his season has started. As much as he loves Penn State and certainly didn't want to leave, I believe every bit of that. The kid is having a Heisman type start to his season. You're not gonna leave a school that's paying you good money to do that. So I'm sure that Bo will still be at Missouri next year. On the prerequisite that Jackson Smolik portals, I would say Penn State will bring in a quarterback next year, at least to compete with Grunkemeyer. But I do think I've been really impressed with Grunk so far to start this campaign, and I think Penn State really likes Ethan Grunkemeyer too. So I wouldn't bank on a new quarterback next year. I would put money on the fact that Penn State probably adds a quarterback next year, some way, somehow. But I would also probably put money on the 2026 starting quarterback is already in that room. Those are my two takes. Johnny, the question that I had is maybe not so much of a question, but it's a topic that I've seen circulating on social media that I wanted to kind of bring up to you. Is Oregon underestimating the power of the whiteout? Because I've seen a lot of people talking about Autzen Stadium gets really loud, and Penn State's not actually that good. It's not as loud of a stadium. The architecture isn't conducive to making loud noise. Like it's just, and they're not loud throughout the entirety of the game. They're only loud right at the start. I've seen a lot of people, a lot of Oregon accounts saying this on social media. So I have my own opinion, and I haven't been to Autzen, so I can't necessarily say anything from that side. But I've seen this. I think that it's worth discussion.
Have have those Oregon fans been to a whiteout?
No, and I will
Okay.
say I've even seen some like Ohio State fans come in and be like, "You
Well,
guys
they're
don't know what you're
just
talking about."
yeah,
But I've
yeah.
also seen
Oh, yeah.
I saw today a Michigan fan say, "Yeah, the whiteout is way overrated." So I don't know.
Coming from a I'm sorry, but coming from a Michigan fan where the big house
Yeah,
is like quiet as a church mouse. That if we're talking about overrated,
yeah,
I mean Ann Arbor, lovely town. I really really enjoy going to Ann Arbor because they got some good spots and all. It's a nice college town. The big house is like honestly kind of a joke.
yes,
Like it is a big house. It has a lot of people in it. Mr. Brightside is like really corny that they do that, and it's not loud at all there.
no,
So I wouldn't. I'm getting in an argument here with like a
with
random Michigan
yeah,
fan on Twitter who I don't know. So
yeah,
we'll bypass that. No, to answer your question about Oregon with the whiteout, like I don't know. Like I've seen on social media that they're practicing in Autzen this week, cranking the volume, trying to replicate it the best you can. But and look, I haven't been to Autzen for a game. I have not been to LSU Death Valley for a night game, which is I feel like that's always the one. Like Kirk Herbstreit and a bunch of other national guys who have been to a lot of these atmospheres always compare the whiteout and LSU Death Valley night game, like against Alabama, Georgia, whatever, as the two kind of preeminent atmospheres in college football. So yeah, I can't say it's like absolutely definitely the best. But I mean, I would be hard pressed to be more impressed than the kind of show that the whiteout puts on every single year, even like regardless of opponent. Because I mean, I've seen that place rocking for Washington and Iowa and all that, but a whiteout at night against an opponent of Oregon's caliber that's coming in on Saturday is a special environment, and very very much looking forward to Saturday night. Yeah.
yeah. I hope some of the Oregon fans who are saying such things are around, because I think it's completely ridiculous to underestimate what the whiteout is. I mean, it has so much hype for a reason. I mean, we've been to how many of them, and not
Yeah.
all of them are against good opponents even. I mean, the Auburn one was pretty awesome back in 21.
Well, I was gonna say because I remember going down because like I was at the 2022 Auburn game,
Yeah.
um, and was talking to fans down there in Auburn, like before Penn State played at Jordan Hare, and I was talking to some Auburn fans who actually made the trip for the whiteout the year before, and they were saying, and they were well traveled throughout the SEC, and they said that it was the best atmosphere they had ever
Yeah.
seen in college football. So, and
Yeah.
again, that's all anecdotal. But at the same time, like it is, I'm excited for Oregon. I'm always interested because I always tend to like, whether it's before, like after a game or whatever, day after around town in State College, find like opposing fans. And then I always tend to, after the whiteout, try to ask them like, what was that experience like for you, win or loss, like regardless of what happens, because it is just as a college football fan, it is one of those really cool atmospheres.
Yeah. I will say, you and I both have mentioned like we can't wait to go out and see Alton and Husky
Yeah.
Stadium out on the West Coast with the new schools that are in the Big Ten. I think that they are probably fantastic environments. I will also say, yes, their architecture is a little more conducive to keeping sound in than Beaver Stadium is. I believe that's part of the plans for the renovations, is to try and keep in a little more of that sound. Pat Kraft said that a few times, but just don't I don't know. Just don't underestimate it, because this is going to be legit. And the other thing I will say is, if people have complaints about Penn State fans not sticking it out through the whole whiteout, the energy is not always great. Well, maybe that's because the last three whiteouts have been, I don't know. I don't know exactly what it is, but they've outscored opponents by at least 100 points. Like, it's been ridiculous. So let's just temper our expectations in favor of the whiteout. I think it's going to be a big one. Johnny, we're 30 minutes into this. We should probably get to our predictions. There's so much we can talk about with this game. It's not going to get old until the game's over and being played. But let's get to it. As always, let's start out with our colleagues, Bob Flounders and Joe Hermit. Bob says his player on the spot, the man of the hour, really is Drew Aller. Says doesn't have a signature win at Penn State yet. It's an easy choice. Don't be surprised if Penn State finds itself in an early hole for the second consecutive time against Oregon. Just not as bad as last time, he says. Bob, however, does pick Penn State 27 to Oregon 23. He says, don't be surprised if they're effective running the ball. But not going to be 300 yards, but Katron Allen's going to do damage. Second half turnover from the defense, and he likes a Luke Reynolds touchdown off of play action specifically. So that's a lot of specifics there for Mr. Flounders.
So Bob picked 27-23.
He did.
So he's right on the number.
He
Because
is.
it's 3.5, right?
Yep.
Yeah, Bob knows the number.
Yeah. Oh, Bob definitely knows the number. And I might say that I might have done the same thing. So not 27-23. We'll get to it. But so Joe Hermit, basically his players on the spot is also Drew Aller. Said we haven't really seen enough from the offense yet. Drew's going to have to rise to the occasion. Says, don't be surprised if Penn State's defense is the best unit on the field, with Jim Knowles scheming up some stuff to confuse Dante Moore and force a couple turnovers. The whiteout will bring a crazy and electric atmosphere. He says it's only September, but it feels like a must win for Penn State. Everything lines up for the signature win James Franklin so desperately needs. He's got Penn State 27, Oregon 20. And then, Johnny, before we get to your pick, we had a couple of guest pickers this week from the Oregonian or our Oregon Live colleagues, sister site over there. James Crepio, longtime reporter over there. He says it could be every bit as competitive as last year's back and forth Big Ten title game. Both teams addressed weaknesses in the offseason, especially on defense for Oregon, who lost a lot of talent. But Jim Knowles calling the defense with a whiteout crowd. He sees Penn State pulling off a narrow win. He's got 28-24 in favor of the Nittany Lions. And Aaron Fentress, who I spoke to on a pod earlier this week, did a great job. He mentions the same thing. Oregon has 18 new starters, had to reload a ton, and Penn State returned a ton of seniors, a lot of talent from a team that won 2 playoff games, played in 3 of them. He says they're more experienced. Why would anyone believe Penn State at home won't won't be able to win against players who are on the bench against Oregon last year. He mentions the environment. He does say if Dante Moore wins this game, get him to New York for his Heisman moment. That's which is honestly a great pick, and he's not ruling it out. But he says he just doesn't see it, and he's got, I believe, the widest margin of any of us. Penn State 33, Oregon 23. So, Johnny, that's what we got so far, and I will let you get to yours. But that's what we got, and I hate to say it, but I think we might have a consensus here, which might be bad news for Penn State.
I know. I was just about to say take Oregon. What is it, plus like 140 money line? With we're kind of jinxing them a little bit. But first of all, the podcast you did with Aaron was great. I listened to that yesterday on Wednesday. And if anyone hasn't listened to it yet, go check it out because he provides a great perspective on Oregon. And obviously, this is one of the biggest games of the year. And so if you're looking to learn a little bit more about the Ducks, you guys had a great conversation. So couldn't recommend that more. Aaron does not have the widest margin of victory for Penn State because that belongs to me.
Oh, shoot. Did I? Okay. There you go. Yeah.
I've got Penn State 31, Oregon 17. Now, let me walk you through a little bit. My players on the spot, and I knew I was going to be writing a big column about Drew Aller this week, so I'm like, oh, I'll save that for the column. Like I'll write about someone else on the spot. And for me, it was Tony Rojas, Zaki Wheatley, whoever else Jim Knowles decides to stick on Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end for Oregon, because he's got everything. He's an absolute freak athlete. NFL draft analysts are already pegging him as like a potential top 10 pick in the upcoming draft. He can beat you with yards after the catch. He's got sure hands. He's got the size you need. He's a willing and able and really good run blocker as well, which I think could show up. Not that that's something you can necessarily defend, but him in the passing game could be a problem and could be a difference maker in this one for Oregon, who I think that don't be surprised if I don't think we're going to have like the Michigan Mo Bamba false start, totally shook from the get-go vibes. I actually said don't be surprised if Oregon scores a touchdown on their first drive because I think Will Stein, their offensive coordinator, is one of the best in the country. And we talk about opening game scripts and just drilling those in and knowing exactly where you're going to go with the football, at least for the most part. I wouldn't be surprised if he cooks up something good for Oregon's first drive and they're able to, whether it's getting out to a lead or matching an opening drive touchdown for Penn State. Wouldn't be surprised if the Ducks find the end zone early. But all that being said, I've already talked about why I think Drew Aller is going to have his moment in this game. I also think Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, who ran all over this defense in Indianapolis, will have an opportunity to do the same. This is an offense at Penn State that has three better receivers, or at least a collective better receivers than they did the last time they played. And they've got a defense in Denai Dennis Sutton, Tony Rojas, Zaki Wheatley, all of the talent, Zane Durant, run by Jim Knowles. I've got Penn State winning comfortably. I think how this plays out is even if Oregon gets an early touchdown, I think we're going to see a Kevin Jennings 2.0 moment where, Kevin Jennings, the SMU quarterback, couldn't hear in the CFP first round. And I think Dante Moore is going to get indoctrinated into the Big Ten in a big way this Saturday night. And I'm not saying he's going to play poorly, but I think he does make a big mistake in the second half that allows Penn State to kind of sit on this thing and ride out a double-digit win.
Interesting. I will say, Johnny, we do have an Oregon fan in the chat here,
Okay.
Widgeon Drake, and he says, "Put down the crack pipe, go Ducks."
Oh, so, okay, all right.
Yeah. I love it. I love like I said, the trash talk's been fun this week. I think that everybody's just ready for this one. I like it, Johnny. I agree with you. I think one of the things that has stuck with me so much as I'm thinking about this game, I really think Penn State will end up being the team that makes fewer mistakes in this one. Last year in the Big Ten championship game, part of why the Oregon offense was so explosive was Penn State had its worst tackling display, like probably of the season, maybe of like a couple years. They missed at least 15 tackles. That's what PFF had them at. Probably could have been more than that. And as I'm rewatching the highlights from that game, it's just like, my God, like nobody went down after the first hit on all these big plays. So I think that that's a lot different under Jim Knowles. I think that the way that he's drilled these players is different than any of the DCs that Penn State's had in the past, with all of them having success. I just think Jim Knowles is different, and I like just in every single way. Jim Knowles is different for a lot of reasons. Kind of heard as much from Amari Campbell and a few other guys, this season. They keep saying practice is harder than the games for us. Like, he is drilling us in practice. I think that they're going to be more disciplined. There won't be busted coverages. And I don't think Drew's going to make the backbreaking mistake like he did, on the essentially pick six against Oregon last year. So to get into my actual prediction, my player on the spot, I went away from Penn State and I said it's Dante Moore because the first year starting quarterback, even though he went to a whiteout as a recruit, has not played in it. And it's not, you can't really prepare for it. It's different. As you mentioned, the Kevin Jennings thing that happened, and I would not be surprised to see it happen to Dante Moore. He looks really talented, but if he struggles with the noise, this could be ugly. If he excels, I think Oregon has a chance to win. He's kind of my X factor in this one. Don't be surprised if I kind of already clued everybody into this one. Zachy Wheatley gets an interception, his first of the season. I think he's playing really well. I think he's getting better too. Those two plays back-to-back against FIU were incredible. The shoestring tackle and the chase down pass breakup, really good. Talented guy who hasn't gotten a pick yet this year, and I think he'll get one. And then my prediction, Johnny, I was with you in the preseason. I thought Penn State was going to win pretty comfortably in this game, and we talked about it multiple times. Oregon's start paired against Penn State's slow offensive start has kind of made me back off of that. But I just think Jim Knowles is an X factor here. I think the whiteout makes a huge difference with Dante Moore. And I think Ryan Barker kicks a fourth quarter field goal that puts Penn State up by, more than a touchdown to make this thing more comfortable and puts Oregon in difficult shoes. So I've got Penn State 30, Oregon 26. 26 is a weird number. I'll take you through what I'm thinking. 2 Ducks touchdowns, 2 field goals, and then Penn State gets up 10, 30-20. And they try to go for 2 on like a touchdown with about 4 or 5 minutes left. Don't get it. Penn State runs the clock out. That's where I'm at. I'm sticking to it, taking a page out of Bob's book and being weirdly specific with my score prediction. So, look, this is fun. I'm ready for this game to be played because we could talk about it forever.
I wonder, are you going to bring your crack pipe to the press box?
I'll think about it. But you see, Johnny, my pick wasn't as wide of a margin. So, but I think all six of us picked Penn State. So maybe we all have crack.
Well, look, I mean, I picked Penn State to win by 14, and Aaron, an Oregon writer, picked Penn State to win by 10. So what's the big difference there?
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe they're just they're not remembering Dante Moore's time at UCLA and how he fared in the Pac-12. Right. I know he's grown a lot, and
he's got much better players around him now.
Yes, and honestly, and I say that like kidding, because last week, I think it was last week, when I was singing Dante Moore's praises, and we had some Penn State fans in the comments being like, "Oh, he hasn't played anybody," so like I was getting it on that end then. And when I say the Kevin Jennings moment kind of thing, I'm not saying he's going to play as poorly as Kevin Jennings played, because he played really bad in that game. I'm just saying, like, there's going to be a moment where it's like the whiteout and the crowd and the defense in the moment is going to affect him, and it's going to cause a big mistake. And if it doesn't, then all the power to Dante Moore, and like I think Aaron wrote, like, he will be like a Heisman type of player. And he has that kind of talent. Like, he is that good of a quarterback. But I just think overall too, like, this is the opportunity for sustained success offensively for Oregon. I can see it coming in spurts, but I just don't see it happening over the course of a game against this defense and against really a secondary too, because we've talked a lot about Zachy Wheatley, but we haven't mentioned A.J. Harris's name yet this entire podcast, and he's one of the best corners in college football who has not been tested so far this season. And Elliott Washington really has not been tested this season. I think those guys are going to have a big game, and obviously they're going to have a lot on their plate against this Oregon offense.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing, we talk about Dante Moore in the whiteout, but I think we have to look at the Oregon offensive line too. They have 4 new starters from last year. It's still early enough in the season that you're waiting for some of that chemistry and communication to really be perfect. I mean, we've seen it with Penn State's offensive line already, and they have 5 guys who have all started multiple games for multiple years too, in Big Ten offensive lines, and they're still working through that. So the combination of first-year quarterback and a lot of first-year offensive linemen will absolutely make a difference. I think it's interesting. Yeah, so Franklin Fanatic says 42-17. So I guess he's got a crack pipe too. But
Yeah, yeah.
and then Joseph says he likes our positivity better than the doom and gloom of the last 4 weeks. I mean, look, I'm still you and I, Johnny, we're both still convinced that Penn State can win a national championship this year. But that's not without saying that like we weren't particularly impressed by the first 3 weeks of the season. I,
Yeah.
I I think the positivity just comes from like it should get better, and if not now, when, kind of.
Yeah, that's a part of it. For me, the first 3 weeks entering the season, I thought Penn State was going to look like lights out, phenomenal against Nevada, FIU, Villanova. And then I would be writing a column after the fact being like, that doesn't matter.
Mm,
That like that them outscoring them like 200-0 and Drew and everyone else looking amazing doesn't matter because Oregon's coming to town. And then it kind of flipped on its head a little bit, but I
yeah,
still feel the same way where like I'm sorry, you can't force me to take like a lot out of what they've done. And I heard, and again, I listen to a lot of national podcasts and read a lot too, just to get like the pulse of what national reporters feel about like especially a big game like this. And a lot of talk around numbers about Drew's, QBR and big time throws by PFF, and the numbers aren't there. I just maybe I'm foolish, maybe I'm naive for overlooking that. Going into this game. And if I am, I'll put my hand up. But I just don't put a lot of value and wouldn't have if he looked amazing and the offense looked amazing in those first 3 games either way.
yeah, very fair. Look, James Franklin is 4-20 against top 10 opponents in his Penn State career. This is a known fact by a lot of people. He's also not been particularly good when he's had more than a week to prepare for opponents. A lot of people think a bye week is a huge deal. Now, granted, a lot of those have come before some of those top 10 opponents. So, factor that in. I pulled up the number. It's 14-12 when he's had more than a week, including playoff postseason games, bowl games, playoff games. But this is the time, right? This is his chance to get it done. I think, you and I both think he's going to get it done. He's got a really talented team to do it with. He's getting it in front of the whiteout. And in our opinion, as we talked about, the biggest whiteout in history, in whiteout history. And I think Penn State gets it done this weekend.
I do too. And look, if they don't, that Oregon fan who chimed in, feel free to come back
Yeah.
next Thursday.
Yeah.
If Oregon has a big statement win, we will be the first to admit we were wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're an honest podcast here. We're not skirting anybody. Yeah, we'll see what happens, man. It's one of those weekends that like just like not to get weird or like whatever, but like I don't know why we cover college football and why so many people care about the sport. Like you've got Alabama, Georgia going on at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
It is a massive weekend for the sport, massive weekend for Penn State, for Drew Aller, for James Franklin, for Dan Lanning, for Dante Moore. Like there's so many storylines in this game, and very much looking forward to sitting by you and Bob in the Beaver Stadium press box on Saturday night.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're making the trip to the game, have fun, be safe getting there, enjoy. Thank you all for tuning in. We had a lot of comments, questions to get to. We love doing that. It's biggest home game of the year for Penn State. So make sure you're subscribed to the podcast, whether it's on YouTube or if you're listening recorded on Spotify or wherever you might listen. Make sure you're liking the show. Make sure you're subscribed to PennLive.com and reading everything we put there. A ton of good stuff and so much more to come. Like you said, Johnny, there are so many storylines here. It's been a fun one. It's going to be a fun game this weekend. Appreciate you tuning in, and everybody, take care.